The rope burns against her wrists as they drag her from the only home she has ever known. Her bare feet stumble across cobblestones still wet with morning dew, and the faces that once smiled at her in the market now turn away in horror. She is 17 years old. Her name is Anna. And according to the Prince Bishop's court, she has given her soul to Satan himself. The year is 1628, and the city of Würzburg trembles under the iron fist of Prince Bishop Julius Echter's successor. The great witch hunt that began under Echter's reign has reached a fever pitch, consuming not just the poor and the desperate, but daughters of merchants, wives of craftsmen, and even children barely old enough to speak their own names. Anna Weber lives with her widowed mother above their small bakery, her days filled with the simple routines of kneading dough and tending the ovens, but simplicity offers no protection in an age when suspicion spreads faster than plague. It begins, as these things often do, with whispered words between neighbors. Old Frau Kellner claims she saw Anna talking to herself in the garden at midnight. The baker's apprentice swears the girl's bread rises too quickly, unnaturally so, and when the harvest fails for the third year running, desperate hearts seek desperate explanations. The formal accusation comes from an unexpected source. Maria Holl, herself recently released from the bishop's prison after confessing to witchcraft under torture. Broken in body and spirit, Maria seeks to purchase her continued freedom with fresh names. Before the magistrates, she speaks in a voice barely above a whisper. "I saw her there, in the dark wood beyond the city walls. She danced naked with the others, while the devil himself watched from his throne of bones." The theological foundation for such accusations finds its authority in the Malleus Maleficarum, that infamous tome penned by Heinrich Kramer nearly a century and a half earlier. "All witchcraft comes from carnal lust," Kramer had written, "which is in women insatiable." The text provides both justification and methodology for what follows, painting women as vessels of inherent corruption, their bodies gateways through which evil enters the world. When the bailiffs come for Anna, she is pulling fresh loaves from the oven. The warrant bears the episcopal seal and charges her with maleficium, congress with demons, and corruption of the faithful through diabolic arts. Her mother's screams echo through the narrow streets as they bind Anna's hands and lead her toward the bishop's fortress, where truth is extracted not through evidence, but through pain. The interrogation chamber beneath Marienburg Fortress has heard countless confessions torn from countless throats. Its stone walls weep with moisture and memory, and the tools of truth-seeking hang ready. The strappado, the leg screws, the heated pincers that can make even the most innocent soul admit to flying through storm clouds on the devil's own wind. Anna's first examination follows the prescribed rituals of spiritual investigation. Father Wilhelm Deuteronomy, the Prince Bishop's chief inquisitor, approaches his work with the methodical precision of a scholar. He has studied Kramer's methods, absorbed the writings of Jean Baudin and Martin Del Rio, and understands that the devil's corruption runs deeper than surface appearances suggest. "Strip her," he commands the bailiffs, his voice carrying the weight of divine authority. "The devil marks his servants, and no mark shall escape our scrutiny." They shave her head and examine every inch of her young body, searching for the telltale signs of diabolic congress. Moles that feel no pain when pricked, birthmarks in suspicious shapes, any blemish that might serve as a devil's teat where familiar spirits might suckle. When they find a small scar on her shoulder, the remnant of a childhood fall, Father Deuteronomy nods with grim satisfaction. "How did Satan mark you, child?" he asks, his pen poised above parchment. "What promises did he whisper in your ear?" Anna's denials mean nothing. The theological framework demands confession, and confession will come. The Malleus is explicit in its methodology. Those who are found to be obstinate in their denials are to be examined by torture. The girl's protestations of innocence are themselves evidence of guilt, for as every learned man knows, the devil shields his servants from easy confession. The questions grow more specific, more invasive. Did the devil appear to her as a man or beast? What color was his skin? How many times did they couple? And in what manner? Father Deuteronomy's queries reflect centuries of theological speculation about the mechanics of diabolic seduction, each detail carefully catalogued in the growing literature of demonology. "The devil's seed is cold as ice," the inquisitor explains to his scribe, quoting from established texts. "Those who have known his embrace speak of a terrible chill that penetrates to the very soul." He turns back to Anna, who huddles naked on the cold stone floor. "Tell us, us of this coldness, child. Speak the truth and find redemption in Christ's mercy. But Anna has no truth to offer that matches the Inquisitor's expectations. She knows nothing of midnight Sabbaths or diabolic congress, nothing of flying ointments or weather-making spells. Her world extends no further than flour and yeast, the warmth of baking ovens, and her mother's gentle song. This ignorance, however, only confirms her guilt in the eyes of the court. When persuasion fails, the law demands sterner measures. The torture chamber in Marienburg Fortress represents the accumulated wisdom of centuries. Its implements designed not merely to inflict pain, but to break the very will itself. Here, in this realm of shadows and screams, truth is whatever the questioner requires it to be. They begin with the strappado, that efficient device that has opened more tongues than any silver key. Anna's arms are bound behind her back and attached to a rope that runs through a pulley in the ceiling. The bailiffs hoist her until her toes barely touch the stone floor, then release the rope suddenly, sending her crashing downward before catching her with a violent jerk that dislocates her shoulders and sends fire through every nerve. I will ask you again, Father Deuteronomy intones, consulting his manual of approved questions. When did the devil first appear to you? What form did he take? What promises did he make? The girl's gasps and sobs fill the chamber, but her answers remain stubbornly innocent. She speaks of her mother, of her prayers, of her hope to marry young Hans the cooper's son. These mundane desires seem to enrage her interrogators more than demonic confessions might. Virtue itself becomes suspicious when viewed through the lens of systematic suspicion. They apply the leg screws next, those iron boots that can crush bone and sinew with methodical precision. Each turn of the screw is accompanied by fresh questions, each tightening designed to crack not just flesh, but resolve. The court records, preserved in meticulous Latin, document every twist of the mechanism, every cry that escapes the prisoner's lips. Hour follows hour in this systematic dismantling of human dignity. The theological rationale is unassailable. God permits torture because he knows the guilty can endure it, while revealing their crimes, while the innocent will confess falsely, and thus expose the torture's injustice. It is a perfect system that produces perfect results, regardless of truth. Finally, as dawnlight filters through the chamber's single-barred window, Anna's resistance crumbles. The words tumble from her broken lips like stones from a shattered wall. Yes, she met the devil in the forest. Yes, she signed his book with her own blood. Yes, she coupled with him beneath the stars while demons danced in circles around them. Father Deuteronomy writes carefully, his quills scratching against parchment as he records each damning detail. The confession follows established patterns, hitting every point required by canonical law. The devil appeared as a handsome young man dressed in black velvet. He promised her riches and power over her enemies. Their coupling was cold and painful, marking her forever as his servant. And what of the Sabbath? The Inquisitor continues, following his script. Who else attended these gatherings of the damned? This is the question that transforms individual persecution into wholesale slaughter. Under torture's persuasive embrace, Anna provides names. Other young women from the town, older widows who had shown her kindness, even children she had seen playing in the streets. Each name is carefully recorded, each accusation another warrant for arrest. The formal trial that follows represents justice, only in the most twisted sense. Würzburg's ecclesiastical court operates under the principle that witchcraft is crimen acceptum, a crime so heinous that normal legal protections are suspended. The accused has no right to counsel, no opportunity to confront witnesses, no presumption of innocence. The torture-extracted confession stands as the primary evidence, supported by theological authorities who insist that no innocent person would confess to such abominations. Prince Bishop Gottfried Johann Georg Fuchs Dornheim presides over these proceedings with the same ceremonial gravity reserved for high holy days. Robed in purple silk and ermine, he sits beneath a golden crucifix, while court officials read the charges in sonorous Latin. Anna stands in chains before this assembly, her body bearing the visible marks of her interrogation, her voice reduced to broken whispers. The prosecution presents its case with methodical thoroughness. They cite chapter and verse from the Malleus Maleficarum, quote extensively from recent papal bulls condemning witchcraft, and invoke the testimonies of learned doctors who have studied the devil's works. The girl's confession is read aloud in full, each damning detail delivered with theatrical emphasis. "Behold," proclaims the prosecutor, "how the enemy of mankind corrupts even the youngest among us. This child, scarcely past the threshold of womanhood, has surrendered her immortal soul for promises of earthly pleasure. She stands before you, not merely as a criminal, but as a warning of of the corruption that threatens our very salvation. Anna's attempts to recant her confession fall on deaf ears. The court understands that the devil often inspires his servants to withdraw their testimonies, hoping to escape earthly justice while remaining bound to eternal damnation. Her tears, her pleas, her obvious terror, all are dismissed as diabolic theater, designed to mislead the faithful. The theological experts testify with scholarly precision. Dr. Martin Brenner, professor of canon law at the University of Würzburg, explains that carnal knowledge of demons produces a fundamental corruption of the human soul. The devil's seed, he lectures the court, carries within it the very essence of rebellion against God. Those who receive it become vessels of chaos, their wombs potential birthplaces for monsters and aberrations. Father Johann Friesner, the diocese's most respected demonologist, provides extensive testimony about the mechanics of diabolic possession. He describes how Satan selects his brides from among the young and vulnerable, how he appears to them first as a seducer, before revealing his true nature as destroyer. The Prince of Lies preys upon innocence itself, he explains, transforming purity into the trial's outcome is predetermined by its structure. In a legal system designed to produce confessions rather than determine truth, acquittal becomes not just unlikely, but theologically impossible. To declare Anna innocent would be to suggest that the Church's methods of investigation are flawed, that centuries of scholarship regarding diabolic influence are mistaken. Such possibilities cannot be contemplated by minds convinced of their own righteousness. The sentence, when it comes, surprises no one familiar with the Prince Bishop's court. Anna Weber, aged 17 years, convicted of witchcraft, diabolic congress, and corruption of the faithful, is condemned to death by burning. The judgment cites both civil and canon law, invoking Exodus 22:18, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," as divine sanction for human justice. But the court's mercy extends to one final opportunity for salvation. If Anna will confess her crimes publicly before the assembled townspeople, if she will renounce Satan and beg Christ's forgiveness, then she may be granted the mercy of strangulation before the flames consume her body. It is a small kindness in an age when kindness itself has become suspect. The days between sentencing and execution pass in a blur of forced piety. Dominican friars visit Anna's cell daily, pressing her to make peace with God while there is still time. They speak earnestly of salvation, of Christ's infinite mercy for even the most corrupted souls. But their theological comfort rings hollow in stone chambers that echo with the screams of previous penitents. Anna's mother comes once, permitted to see her daughter through iron bars for the space of a single prayer. The older woman's tears fall like rain as she presses a small wooden cross into Anna's manacled hands. "Forgive them," she whispers, her voice barely audible above the prison's ambient sounds of suffering. As Christ forgave those who crucified him, forgive them their blindness. The town prepares for execution with the same methodical care applied to festival celebrations. Carpenters construct the scaffold and stake with particular attention to wind direction and crowd control. The church commissions special prayers for the occasion, asking God's blessing on their efforts to purge evil from the community. Children are excused from their lessons so they might witness the triumph of righteousness over diabolic corruption. On the morning of execution, Anna is dressed in a white shift marked with red crosses, symbols of Christ's victory over sin. They place a paper crown upon her shaved head, painted with devils and inscribed with her crimes in Gothic script. The procession through Würzburg's narrow streets takes on the character of religious theatre, complete with chanting priests and banner-bearing acolytes. The crowd that gathers in the market square numbers in the thousands. Merchants close their shops. Farmers abandon their fields, and even the sick rise from their beds to witness this victory over darkness. Their faces show not cruelty but relief. The terrible fear that has gripped their community for months will finally be purged in purifying fire. The stake stands 12 feet high, its base surrounded by bundled faggots and straw soaked in pitch for rapid ignition. Anna climbs the wooden steps with assistance from the bailiffs, her legs too weak from imprisonment to support her properly. The crowd falls silent as Father Deuteronomy begins the final ritual, his voice carrying clearly across the square. "Anna Weber," he intones, reading from his prepared text. You have been found guilty of the detestable crime of witchcraft, of carnal congress with demons, and of corrupting the faithful through diabolic arts. Do you now, in this final hour, renounce Satan and all his works? Do you cast yourself upon the mercy of Christ, our Savior? Her voice, when it comes, is barely a whisper. I renounce the devil and all his works. I cast myself upon Christ's mercy. The words are ritual, expected, necessary for the small mercy of strangulation. But those close enough to hear detect something else in her tone. Not confession, but exhaustion. The final surrender of a spirit broken beyond repair. The executioner approaches with his cord, a merciful man who takes no pleasure in his work, but serves the law with professional competence. The noose settles around Anna's neck, while Father Deuteronomy continues his prayers, asking God to receive this penitent soul despite her crimes. The crowd chants responses with the fervor of the truly convinced, their collective voice rising toward heaven like incense. When the cord tightens, Anna's struggles are brief. Her young body, weakened by months of imprisonment and torture, offers little resistance to death's embrace. Within moments, her suffering ends, though the flames that follow will burn until evening, reducing flesh and bone to ash and memory. The execution achieves its intended effect. Fear departs from Würzburg like mist before the morning sun, replaced by collective satisfaction at justice served and evil punished. The Prince-Bishop's subjects return to their homes convinced that righteousness has triumphed, that their community has been purged of diabolic corruption through proper application of divine law. But even as Anna's ashes cool in the market square, new accusations are already forming in whispered conversations and suspicious glances. The machinery of persecution, once set in motion, develops its own momentum. Other names appear in other confessions. Other young women find themselves dragged from their beds to face the same methodical destruction. Anna Weber's death represents more than individual tragedy. It stands as testimony to humanity's capacity for self-deception dressed in righteousness clothing. Her story, repeated countless times across early modern Europe, reveals how fear transforms neighbors into enemies, how theological certainty justifies the most profound cruelties. The records of her trial, preserved in Würzburg's episcopal archives, fill 17 pages of careful Latin script. Every question asked, every answer given, every turn of the torturer's screw is documented with scholarly precision. These pages represent not just legal proceedings, but cultural artifacts, windows into a worldview that saw evil everywhere and demanded its eradication through fire. The witch hunts that claimed Anna and thousands like her were not products of medieval ignorance but early modern sophistication. They flourished in an age of universities and printing presses, supported by learned treatises and legal precedents. The men who condemned these women were not ignorant peasants but educated clerics, trained in theology and law, convinced of their moral superiority and divine mandate. The prince-bishops who orchestrated these persecutions left behind impressive architectural monuments, palaces and churches that still dominate German skylines. But their true legacy lies in smaller things. Court records filled with names of the dead, testimony to humanity's endless capacity for justifying cruelty through appeals to higher authority. Modern visitors to Würzburg find few traces of the witch trials that once terrorized the city. The market square where Anna died now hosts flower vendors and tourist cafes. The fortress that housed her final torments offers scenic views and historical exhibitions that carefully avoid discussing its darkest chapters. Only in the archives do these stories survive, waiting for those willing to confront uncomfortable truths about civilization's fragile foundations. Anna Weber was 17 when they burned her for crimes that existed only in the fevered imaginations of her persecutors. She died, not because she was guilty of diabolic congress, but because she was convenient, young enough to seem vulnerable, poor enough to lack protection, female enough to embody her culture's deepest fears about uncontrolled sexuality and spiritual corruption. Her death solved no problems and protected no one, but it satisfied the terrible human need to transform abstract fears into concrete targets. In the end, we are left with questions that have no comfortable answers. How do ordinary people become complicit in extraordinary evil? What transforms neighbors into executioners, communities into slaughterhouses? How do we distinguish between righteous conviction and systematic delusion when both claim divine sanction and moral necessity? These questions echo across centuries, finding new forms in new ages, but never losing their essential urgency. Anna Weber's ashes, scattered on the wind long ago. But the forces that killed her, fear, certainty, the desire to purge the world of its complications through violence, remain as potent today as they were in 1628. Her story reminds us that civilization's greatest enemy may not be barbarism from without, but the barbarity we dress in righteousness and call justice.